everyone, it's Becky here. So today I'm at West Dyke Trail in Richmond, in the suburban area of Vancouver. And it's located at the very end of Plein Road in Richmond. And it's a beautiful sunny day with some lovely clouds close to the horizon. So here's my sketchbook and my gooseneck tripod. I'm going to put my phone there on the clamp. And I've got this lovely panorama view in front of me of the marsh, and the sea is in the distance. So the landscape is quite wild here and well, nothing too outstanding, but I'm going to make this view more interesting by including this walking trail over here, suggesting a sense of one-point perspective. So these grass blades, they are aligning on this invisible slanting line going into the vanishing point where the two lines of the trail are going into. Now I'm going to start to plant some evergreen trees and electricity posts, further suggesting a sense of perspective. So as you can see, these electricity posts are visually taller and taller as they move from right to the left. And yeah, adding some bushes on the bottom and some houses tucked behind. Yeah, so the top of these bushes are all aligning on an invisible horizontal line going down into the vanishing point, and using pretty intense pen strokes to suggest the shaded area on the bottom bit of these bushes. And these evergreen trees, they are very much like dark green silhouettes in the far distance. And to make my drawing look cleaner, one of the tricks I like to do is to color in some of the areas with solid brown ink. Now I'm adding on like a jogger. Yeah, so there are some people jogging and just strolling on this trail. Adding some more bushes around the middle of my composition. Now starting to draw the horizon line. Yeah, so the right half of this panorama is going to be relatively flat compared to the left side. Now I see a couple passing by, so I'm just adding them in, walking on the trail, and the lady on the left, using my short-term memory to get their gestures in, and then using these loose lines to suggest a little pathway someone trampled on, and adding some taller grass and bushy texture for the marsh area, using bold shading to suggest volume for the bushes. Now I'm starting to trace out the contour outlines of the mountains in the far distance, the rise and falls, yeah, of the peaks. And there is at least another one row of mountains in the back. Now I'm having fun adding on these driftwoods in the middle of the marsh. And using loose segments of lines to suggest the taller grass. Most of these grass are dried, but it's actually a very satisfying experience to fill in the blank space. Row after row, yeah, these strokes are really organic, suggesting grass blades. So the dried grass, I think they have a stronger definition compared to the green ones. Adding some more driftwoods, loosely laying around, using these segments to suggest the uneven ground of the trail. So these lovely puffy clouds close to the horizon, they have very clear and definite shapes. So instead of using watercolors to go around them, I think this time it's more ideal to draw their contour outlines nice and clear using my pen. The puffy shapes, that's pretty hard to suggest, with watercolors wrapping around. And yeah, again, the top half of these clouds are very round and puffy. The bottom is almost like a straight horizontal line. Now I'm starting to draw these more dynamic and loose ones there on the higher part of the sky. Yeah, little puff here and there. So here's the look of my finished line drawing, and it took me about 20 minutes sitting and relaxing at this picnic table. Now I'm ready to paint watercolors using the Daniel Smith brand in a mini palette. I just wetted the sky area with clear water, and then using manganese blue mixed with a bit of cobalt blue to paint the higher part of the sky. Now I'm mixing a little bit of spring green into manganese blue to paint the lower part of the sky, because there's always a sense of color and value transition in the sky area. The sky is never a perfect solid blue. And yeah, for this part, touching the horizon below the clouds. And that's very much it for the sky area. I don't want to overwork it. Now, I'm just painting an underpainting for the area below the sky using very diluted yellow ochre. Everything has like an earthy undertone. Now, I'm mixing spring green with a little bit of yellow ochre to paint the fresh green grass. A higher ratio of yellow ochre for a bit of color and tonal transition. And I'm going to do the same thing for the grass on the right side of the trail, playing with more or less spring green and yellow ochre. So some parts with dried grass is close to 100% yellow ochre, wet into wet, blending with spring green. Sometimes it's about half and half of yellow ochre and spring green. Using a large and juicy brush is actually good to paint instead of using a very dry one to create loose fluid washes. I'm still playing with these two colors, spring green and yellow ochre, at different ratios in every few brush marks. Yeah, a slight bit more yellow ochre. So after I laid out an area of colors, I pretty much never go back and keep on rubbing, because the more you rub, the more you're going to disturb the vibrant colors crashing together. Now, I'm mixing a shading green by mixing burnt sienna into hooker's green to shade the bottom bit of these grass, just to suggest a higher sense of volume, continuing to use these bold brush marks. Okay, so now I'm ready to paint the mountains in the far distance using a very high ratio, like 70% of cobalt blue, 30% of manganese blue. And yeah, just keep reloading my brush so the color definition won't fade out. I want a pretty strong intensity. And for the even more far away one, I'm mixing a little bit of imperial purple into cobalt blue for a blue-violet color definition of even far distant mountains. Now I'm using mostly hooker's green to paint these evergreens. Yeah, so just keeping the color scheme and the brushwork really spontaneous and simple. Now I'm using burnt sienna with a little bit of orange mixed in to add on some vibrancy to paint the first layer of the dried grass in the marsh. As you can see, there are actually quite a few piles of dried grass here and there. Mixing a little bit of orange into brown would spice up the brown tone a bit better, making it more attractive. So you don't have to duplicate the shapes and colors as what they are in the actual world. Feel free to use your artist license to make a lot of colors pop out better. Now I'm shading the bottom bit of these dried grass by mixing imperial purple into burnt sienna. As you can see, this is a more interesting shade of brown compared to using black or other dark browns, slightly purplish. And yeah, I can feel the purple hiding among the bottom of these dried grass. So this color is not made up, but it's felt. So a lot of colors may not be on the surface of objects. You just have to look deeper to feel their existence. Now I'm using pretty diluted burnt umber to paint the dirt road. Now it's time to paint the sea very lightly using very diluted cobalt blue mixed with manganese blue. Now for the gray, shading the bottom 40% of these clouds, I'm using my usual recipe of gray by mixing cobalt blue with imperial purple. Starting with a pretty light tone by diluting this blue violet with a lot of water. And I think, agreeing with many painters out there, blue violet is a more appropriate color for shading clouds. And for sunny day clouds, this blue violet tint is quite gentle, mostly around the bottom 30% of each, and around the wrinkles. I'm also going to continue to use the blue violet to suggest those very far away clouds. So for clouds close to the horizon, they are the most far away compared to the ones higher up. Okay, so now back to these evergreens on the left. I'm using the shade of green, which is hooker's green mixed with burnt sienna, to shade these trees in the back. At the same time, adding a higher sense of contrast and volume. You can mix in a little bit of cobalt blue to intensify the shade of green even more. Adding some final shading for the green areas here and there. Now, I want to paint another layer of cobalt blue for the distant mountains, because when watercolor dries, the value tends to fade away a bit. So for some areas, you may want to add another layer of the same color containing less water. And lastly, I'm going to use the leftover colors in my palette to paint these people. Again, nowadays, most people are wearing very muted colors like black, white, and gray. Mostly jeans or black pants. And that's very much it. Here's the look of my finished 40-minute sketch on location. Thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. And I'll see you around in the next tutorial video soon. Take care. Bye.